Sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the beginning of the greatest second chance. Heavy rain swept across Grant Park in downtown Chicago, turning quiet walking paths into streams of rushing water, while thunder rolled softly above the skyline. Most people hurried toward their cars with their heads lowered, hoping to escape the storm before it grew worse. Ethan Carter tightened the hood of his old Navy rain jacket as he hurried across the park, carrying a grocery bag in one hand and his daughter's forgotten science project carefully protected beneath the other arm. He had promised 12-year-old Sophie that he would arrive before dinner, and promises were not something Ethan ever broke. Raising a daughter alone had taught him that trust was built through ordinary moments repeated every single day. Just as he reached the small wooden bridge crossing a narrow creek, a desperate series of frightened barks echoed through the rain. Ethan immediately stopped. Another bark followed, sharper this time, carried by the rushing wind. He carefully placed the grocery bag beneath a nearby shelter before walking toward the sound. Below the bridge, muddy water rushed faster than usual after the afternoon storm. A frightened golden retriever puppy struggled on a narrow patch of wet ground near the edge of the creek, unable to climb back onto the slippery bank. The frightened little animal trembled as rain soaked its golden fur. Ethan never hesitated. He carefully climbed down the muddy slope, keeping one hand against a tree trunk for balance while speaking softly. "Easy there, buddy. You are going to be all right." The puppy looked toward him with frightened eyes, but slowly stopped struggling as Ethan gently reached forward. Within seconds, he carefully lifted the shivering little dog into his arms and climbed back toward the walking path with patient determination. The puppy immediately pressed against his chest, finally feeling safe. At that exact moment, the sound of hurried footsteps approached from the opposite direction. A woman wearing an elegant beige trench coat over a navy business suit ran across the bridge, calling the puppy's name with unmistakable concern. Her hair was damp from the rain, but she barely noticed. The moment she saw the puppy safely resting in Ethan's arms, relief filled her face. "Oliver," she cried before slowing to catch her breath. Ethan smiled warmly and gently placed the puppy into her waiting arms. "I think someone was looking for you," he said with quiet kindness. The woman hugged the puppy tightly before looking back toward Ethan. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I do not even know how to repay you." Ethan simply shook his head with an easy smile. "You already did," he replied. "He is safe." Before she could ask his name, Ethan picked up his groceries and continued walking through the rain toward the parking lot. She watched his quiet figure disappear beneath the gray afternoon sky, carrying nothing except a worn grocery bag and the careful confidence of someone who expected nothing in return. Clutching Oliver close, she realized she had forgotten to ask the stranger who had rescued the little puppy everything that mattered. She never imagined that fate was quietly preparing to bring their paths together once again, and that the man walking away from her in the rain would soon become impossible for her heart to forget. By the time Ethan Carter pulled his aging pickup truck into the driveway, the rain had softened into a gentle drizzle that shimmered beneath the neighborhood streetlights. Warm light glowed from the front windows of the modest brick home where 12-year-old Sophie was already waiting by the door, her science project now safely resting beneath one arm. The moment she saw her father step out carrying the groceries, she opened the front door with a bright smile. "I knew you would not forget," she said happily. Ethan laughed softly as he handed her the carefully protected project. "I made you a promise." Sophie smiled because she already knew something few people ever noticed about her father. He always kept his word. Inside the cozy kitchen, the familiar rhythm of their evenings slowly replaced the sound of rain outside. Ethan prepared grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, while Sophie described everything that had happened at school, from her upcoming science fair to the stray kitten that had wandered onto the playground during recess. Ethan listened with complete attention, never reaching for his phone or allowing distractions to interrupt the conversation. Raising Sophie alone after losing his wife years earlier had taught him that children remembered attention far longer than expensive gifts. After dinner, they washed dishes together before Ethan helped her review math homework around the worn oak dining table that had been in the family for years. The house was simple, comfortable, and filled with quiet laughter. There were no luxury decorations or expensive furniture, only photographs, books, handmade drawings, and memories that transformed ordinary rooms into a real home. Later that evening, after Sophie had gone upstairs, Ethan opened his laptop to finish reviewing construction plans for a community recreation center where he worked as a senior structural engineer. His reputation among coworkers had never come from seeking recognition, but from solving difficult problems with patience and honesty. When younger engineers struggled, Ethan stayed late to help without expecting praise. When contractors faced unexpected setbacks, he searched for practical solutions instead of assigning blame. Quiet dignity had become the foundation of every part of his life. Across downtown Chicago, the woman from the park gently dried Oliver's golden fur inside a luxurious penthouse overlooking the city skyline. Oliver happily curled beside the fireplace, while she sat quietly holding a warm cup of tea. Her name was Emily Harrison, founder and chief executive officer of Harrison Development Group, one of the city's most respected real estate companies. Despite years of business success, one thought refused to leave her mind. She could still picture the calm expression on the stranger's face as he walked away without accepting money, attention, or even giving his name. Most people recognized her immediately because of magazine covers, business interviews, or charity events. He had treated her exactly like anyone else. Curious, she opened the small security application connected to Oliver's identification collar, hoping it might reveal where. The signal had briefly disappeared. Instead, the location history simply confirmed what she already knew. Somewhere near Grant Park, a quiet man carrying groceries had chosen kindness over convenience without expecting anything in return. Emily slowly smiled to herself before gently stroking Oliver's head. "We are going to find him," she whispered. Oliver lifted his ears as though he completely understood. Neither of them realized that the next meeting would reveal far more than the identity of a stranger. It would quietly reopen a chapter of life that both of them believed had ended long ago. The following Saturday morning, Emily Harrison returned to Grant Park with Oliver happily trotting beside her on a leather leash, hoping that chance might once again bring the quiet stranger into her path. The rain had disappeared, replaced by crisp autumn air and golden sunlight filtering through rows of colorful maple trees. Families filled the walking trails, children laughed near the playground, and musicians performed soft melodies beneath nearby gazebos. Emily walked slowly, occasionally stopping whenever Oliver became interested in another passing dog, but her eyes continued searching the crowd. Nearly an hour passed before Oliver suddenly lifted his head, wagged his tail excitedly, and pulled gently toward a picnic area overlooking the lake. Emily followed him with quiet curiosity. There, seated beneath a large oak tree, was the same man she had been hoping to find. Ethan Carter sat beside his daughter on a checkered blanket while helping her assemble a small model bridge for an upcoming school science competition. Pieces of lightweight wood, rulers, pencils, and glue were carefully arranged around them. Sophie laughed as her father patiently demonstrated how stronger support beams could carry greater weight without using extra material. Ethan noticed Oliver first. The cheerful golden retriever bounded toward him with unmistakable excitement before stopping politely at the edge of the blanket. Ethan smiled warmly and scratched behind the puppy's ears. "Well, look who decided to visit," he said softly. Emily approached a moment later with an apologetic smile. "I think he remembered you before I did," she said. Ethan stood and offered a friendly nod. "I am glad to see he is doing well." Emily looked at him more carefully than she had during the rainstorm. His clothes were simple, his shoes showed signs of daily use, and his hands carried the quiet marks of years spent building things, yet there was a calm confidence about him that immediately drew her attention. Sophie stood politely beside her father. "Hi," she said with an easy smile. "I am Sophie." Emily smiled back. "It is nice to meet you, Sophie. I am Emily, and this little troublemaker is Oliver." The puppy happily circled Sophie before sitting beside her as though they had known each other for years. Watching the children play together, Emily felt an unexpected sense of peace. "I never properly thanked you," she said. "You saved someone very important to me." Ethan gently shook his head. Any decent person would have done the same. Emily smiled quietly because she knew that was not always true. As they talked, she learned that Ethan was a structural engineer who spent weekends helping Sophie explore science, parks, museums, and libraries instead of shopping malls or expensive attractions. Every answer he gave centered not on himself, but on his daughter. Before long, Sophie wandered a few yards away with Oliver to admire ducks near the water, while Ethan and Emily remained beneath the shade of the old tree. For a brief moment, Emily studied his face and felt an unexpected sense of familiarity she could not explain. Then Ethan mentioned the university where he had studied engineering many years earlier. Emily's expression slowly changed. She remembered that campus. She remembered a young engineering student with the same calm eyes who had once asked her to have coffee after a charity fundraiser. Believing their futures belonged to different worlds, she had politely declined without giving him a real chance. Standing before her now, she realized the quiet father who had rescued Oliver was not simply a stranger brought into her life by coincidence. He was someone fate had quietly returned after years apart, offering a second opportunity neither of them had ever expected. Emily Harrison remained silent for several long seconds as memories from years earlier quietly returned. She could still picture the university courtyard where a young engineering student had politely invited her to coffee after volunteering together at a scholarship fundraiser. At the time, she had admired his kindness but convinced herself that their lives were moving toward completely different futures. She had dreamed of building a national business, while he had spoken about designing safer schools, bridges, and community centers. She had smiled, thanked him for asking, and walked away believing she had made the practical decision. Standing beside him now beneath the old oak tree, she realized life had quietly challenged every assumption she once believed. Ethan noticed the thoughtful expression on her face and smiled gently. "You remember, do not you?" he asked. Emily nodded with a quiet laugh. "I do now. I cannot believe I did not recognize you immediately." Ethan looked toward Sophie, who was happily throwing a tennis ball for Oliver across the grass. "It has been a long time," he replied. "People change." Emily watched him carefully before answering. "Some people become more successful. Others become more admirable." Ethan simply smiled without responding to the compliment. The conversation drifted naturally toward ordinary subjects. Emily asked about his engineering projects, while Ethan asked about her company and the affordable housing initiatives she had recently supported throughout Chicago. Neither spoke about wealth or status. Instead, they spoke about responsibility, family, and the satisfaction that came from improving other people's lives. As the afternoon sun slowly crossed the sky, Sophie returned carrying Oliver's leash with the puppy happily walking beside her. "Dad," she said excitedly, "Oliver likes my bridge almost as much as I do." Everyone laughed softly. Emily noticed the effortless warmth between father and daughter. Ethan never hurried Sophie, never dismissed her questions, and never looked distracted when she spoke. Every answer carried patience. Every smile carried reassurance. It was a kind of quiet leadership business school could teach. Before leaving, Emily reached into her handbag and removed an elegant business card. "I would still like to thank you properly," she said. "Perhaps dinner someday." Ethan looked at the card for a moment before accepting it politely. "That is generous," he replied. "But you really do not owe me anything." Emily smiled with gentle determination. Maybe this is not about owing someone. Maybe it is about not letting another opportunity disappear. Ethan slipped the card into his jacket pocket without making any promises. "We will see," he answered kindly. They exchanged warm goodbyes before walking in opposite directions through the park. During the drive home, Sophie glanced toward her father from the passenger seat. "She seemed really nice," she said. Ethan kept his eyes on the quiet suburban road ahead. "She is." Sophie smiled knowingly. "I think she wanted to see you again." Ethan laughed softly but did not answer. Meanwhile, across the city, Emily sat inside her car holding the steering wheel without starting the engine. She realized that throughout years of board meetings, business negotiations, and public recognition, very few conversations had left her feeling genuinely peaceful. Yet one simple afternoon beside a park with a single father, his daughter, and a playful golden retriever had reminded her of something she had almost forgotten. The most meaningful relationships rarely begin with impressive introductions. They begin with ordinary kindness, quiet dignity, and the courage to recognize the value of someone who never tries to prove it. During the weeks that followed, life quietly settled into a rhythm neither Ethan Carter nor Emily Harrison had expected. They did not exchange endless messages or arrange elaborate dinners. Instead, their paths crossed naturally, almost as though the city itself wanted to remind them that meaningful relationships are built one ordinary moment at a time. On Tuesday evenings, Emily often walked Oliver through Grant Park after leaving her office, and more than once she found Ethan and Sophie there building model airplanes, reading library books, or sharing homemade sandwiches beneath the same old oak tree. Every meeting felt effortless. There were no attempts to impress one another, only genuine conversations that seemed to grow deeper with every passing week. Emily gradually began noticing details about Ethan that no newspaper article or business profile could ever reveal. She watched him patiently kneel beside Sophie while repairing the chain on her bicycle without a single complaint. She saw him spend nearly an hour helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries inside before quietly mowing the woman's front lawn because her grandson had recently moved away. One Saturday morning, she happened to pass a neighborhood community center where Ethan volunteered with several young engineering students, teaching children how to build simple wooden bridges and encouraging every child who believed mathematics was too difficult. He praised effort more than perfect results and celebrated curiosity more than talent. The children smiled whenever he entered the room because they knew he would always make them feel capable. Emily remained standing quietly near the doorway for several minutes without interrupting. She realized that Ethan never behaved kindly because someone was watching. Kindness was simply the way he chose to live. One afternoon, after another walk through the park, Sophie tugged gently on Emily's sleeve while Oliver chased falling autumn leaves nearby. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Emily smiled warmly. "Of course." Sophie looked down for a moment before speaking. "My dad smiles a lot now. He did not smile this much before we met you." Emily felt her heart grow unexpectedly quiet. "Your father has always seemed like someone who carries a lot of hope," she answered softly. Sophie nodded. "He always tells me hope is something you choose every morning." Emily glanced toward Ethan, who was laughing as Oliver happily ran circles around a nearby fountain. In boardrooms, she had learned how to evaluate financial reports, negotiate complicated agreements, and recognize profitable investments within minutes. Yet none of those skills had prepared her to recognize the extraordinary value of an ordinary man whose greatest achievement was simply making the people around him feel safe, respected, and loved. Later that evening, sitting alone beside the wide windows of her penthouse overlooking the glowing Chicago skyline, Emily reflected upon every decision that had shaped her career. Awards, interviews, successful developments, and business victories suddenly seemed strangely incomplete. For years, she believed success was measured by buildings completed and companies expanded. Ethan quietly revealed another measure entirely. Success could also be measured by a daughter's laughter, a neighbor's gratitude, a frightened puppy carried safely home, and the quiet peace someone leaves behind wherever they go. Looking down at the business card she had once handed Ethan, Emily smiled to herself with gentle certainty. This time she did not want another business meeting, another polite conversation, or another opportunity quietly slipping away because of fear. For the first time in many years, she knew exactly what her heart wanted, and she hoped the quiet single father who had already changed so many lives might one day be willing to let her become part of his as well. Several days later, an unexpected opportunity quietly tested everything Emily Harrison had begun to admire about Ethan Carter. Harrison Development Group announced a community design initiative to renovate an aging neighborhood recreation center on the west side of Chicago, a project intended to create safe classrooms, sports facilities, and study spaces for local families. Emily personally attended the first planning session, believing it would be another routine meeting with architects, engineers, and city officials. As she entered the conference room, however, she smiled in surprise. Ethan was already there reviewing structural drawings with several younger engineers. He had volunteered through his own company because the recreation center was only a few miles from the neighborhood where he and Sophie lived. The meeting began with detailed discussions about budgets, timelines, and construction requirements. When an unexpected design problem threatened to delay the project by several months, consultants proposed expensive alternatives that would force the community to wait even longer. Ethan quietly studied the drawings for several minutes before asking permission to share another idea. He suggested a practical redesign using existing structural supports, locally available materials, and a revised construction sequence that would reduce costs while preserving every important safety standard. His explanation was calm, organized, and remarkably easy for everyone to understand. Engineers around the table quickly recognized the strength of his proposal. City representatives nodded with growing enthusiasm. Even experienced architects admitted the solution was both elegant and realistic. Emily watched the entire conversation without saying a word. Once again, Ethan had no interest in proving himself. He simply wanted the children who would eventually use the recreation center to have a safe place to learn and play as soon as possible. After the meeting ended, several executives congratulated Ethan for solving a problem that had frustrated the entire planning committee. He thanked them politely before gathering his notes and quietly preparing to leave. Emily caught up with him in the hallway overlooking the city skyline. "You always seem to find the answer without asking for recognition," she said with a warm smile. Ethan looked through the tall windows before replying. "Buildings last because strong foundations stay hidden beneath the surface. I think people are often the same." Emily considered those words carefully. "You could lead projects all over the country if you wanted." Ethan smiled gently. "Maybe. But every afternoon there is a 12-year-old waiting for me after school, and I would rather be the father she remembers than the executive everyone else remembers." Emily lowered her eyes for a moment, deeply moved by the quiet certainty in his voice. She had spent years believing career success required sacrificing personal moments. Ethan had somehow achieved something far more meaningful. Later that evening, Emily drove past Lincoln Middle School on her way home and happened to see Ethan standing near the entrance as students poured outside. Sophie's face immediately brightened when she spotted her father, and she ran toward him carrying a backpack almost larger than herself. Ethan greeted her with the same patient smile Emily had come to recognize, listening attentively as Sophie excitedly described her day while they walked toward the old pickup truck together. Emily remained parked across the street for only a few quiet moments before continuing home. She finally understood why Ethan had gently avoided every attempt to impress her. His greatest accomplishment had never been his intelligence or professional skill. It was the life he built every ordinary day through loyalty, humility, and unwavering love. Sitting behind the steering wheel as the evening sun painted the Chicago skyline with warm shades of gold, Emily made a silent decision. She would no longer wait for chance to decide their future. This time, she would be the one willing to ask for the opportunity she had once allowed to slip away. The following Saturday afternoon, Ethan Carter received a handwritten note delivered to his front porch inside a simple cream-colored envelope. There was no company logo, no formal invitation, and no expensive stationery designed to impress. Inside rested a single card written in careful handwriting. "If you still believe some opportunities deserve a second chance, would you meet me at Grant Park tomorrow afternoon? No meetings, no business, just two people talking. Emily." Ethan quietly read the note twice before placing it beside a framed photograph of Sophie. His daughter wandered into the kitchen carrying a bowl of popcorn and immediately noticed the thoughtful expression on his face. "Is everything okay, Dad?" she asked. Ethan smiled softly and handed her the card. Sophie carefully read every word before looking back at him with an unmistakably hopeful smile. "I think she is being brave," she said. Ethan nodded. "I think she is." Sophie climbed onto a chair beside him. "Are you going?" Ethan remained silent for several moments. "I do not know," he admitted honestly. "Sometimes protecting the people you love means being careful about opening your heart again." Sophie reached across the table and gently squeezed his hand. "You always tell me that courage is doing the right thing even when it feels uncertain." Ethan laughed quietly because he recognized his own words. The following afternoon, autumn leaves drifted gently across Grant Park as golden sunlight reflected against the calm surface of the lake. Emily Harrison arrived several minutes early with Oliver happily walking beside her. She wore a simple light blue sweater, dark jeans, and comfortable walking shoes instead of the elegant business suits she usually wore. For the first time in years, she wanted someone to meet the real woman behind the title. A few minutes later, Ethan appeared, hands resting comfortably inside the pockets of his navy jacket. They greeted one another with warm smiles before beginning a slow walk beneath the colorful trees. For a while, neither of them spoke about the past. They admired the changing leaves, watched children fly colorful kites, and smiled as Oliver chased squirrels with endless enthusiasm. Eventually, Emily quietly broke the silence. I have been thinking about something ever since we met again, she said. Ethan turned toward her with calm attention. Years ago, when you invited me for coffee after that university fundraiser, I convinced myself our lives belonged in different worlds. I thought success meant choosing ambition first. I never realized what I was walking away from. Ethan listened without interruption. Emily continued, her voice gentle but steady. When Oliver ran into that creek, you helped him without asking who owned him. Since then I have watched you care for your daughter, your neighbors, complete strangers, and everyone around you with the same kindness. You never perform goodness. You simply live it. I admired your character before I realized I was beginning to admire you. Ethan looked across the quiet lake before answering. I appreciated hearing that. Emily stopped walking and faced him with complete honesty. This time I do not want fear or assumptions to decide for me. Ethan, would you let me take you to dinner? Not because I owe you anything, but because I would genuinely like a second chance to know the man I should have known years ago. Ethan smiled warmly, but instead of answering immediately, he glanced toward Oliver, happily running through the fallen leaves. Then he looked back at Emily with quiet sincerity. There is one person whose opinion matters to me before I make decisions like this. Emily nodded with understanding. Sophie. Ethan smiled. She has already reminded me that courage sometimes means giving hope another opportunity. Emily felt her heart grow lighter as the afternoon breeze carried golden leaves around them, realizing that although his answer was not yet complete, the door she believed had closed forever had quietly begun to open once again. That evening, after returning home from the park, Ethan Carter found Sophie sitting at the kitchen table finishing a history assignment while the comforting aroma of homemade chicken soup filled the house. She looked up the moment he entered and smiled with quiet curiosity. How did it go? She asked. Ethan placed his keys beside the fruit bowl before sitting across from her. It was honest, he answered. Sometimes honesty is more difficult than any conversation. Sophie closed her notebook and rested her chin on her hands. Did she really ask for another chance? Ethan nodded slowly. She did. Sophie remained silent for a moment before speaking with the simple wisdom that often surprised him. People can make mistakes, Dad. You always taught me that what matters is whether they learn from them. Ethan smiled softly because he had indeed spent years teaching his daughter exactly that lesson. I also taught you that trust is built slowly. Sophie nodded with complete understanding. Then maybe let her build it. The following Sunday afternoon, Emily Harrison arrived at Ethan's neighborhood carrying nothing more than a small paper bag from a local bakery and Oliver happily walking beside her. She had intentionally left her luxury car several blocks away, choosing instead to walk the final distance through the quiet streets lined with maple trees whose autumn leaves painted the sidewalks gold and crimson. She wanted this visit to feel personal rather than impressive. Ethan welcomed her warmly onto the front porch, where Sophie greeted her with an excited smile after recognizing Oliver. Immediately, I was hoping you would come, Sophie admitted as she knelt to pet the cheerful golden retriever. Emily handed her the bakery bag. I heard someone in this house likes cinnamon rolls. Sophie's eyes brightened. They are my favorite. Emily laughed softly. Then I guessed correctly. The afternoon unfolded without formality. Instead of discussing business or past regrets, they prepared hot chocolate together in the kitchen, laughed as Oliver patiently waited for someone to accidentally drop a cookie crumb, and spent time assembling the final pieces of Sophie's model bridge for the upcoming science fair. Emily listened carefully as Sophie explained every detail of the project, encouraging her with genuine interest rather than polite compliments. Ethan quietly observed the interaction from across the room. Emily never tried to win Sophie's affection with expensive gifts or dramatic promises. She simply gave her full attention, asked thoughtful questions, and celebrated every small accomplishment. As daylight slowly faded, the three of them walked to the nearby neighborhood park where children played beneath the warm colors of the setting sun. Sophie and Oliver ran ahead while Ethan and Emily followed at an easy pace along the winding path. Emily finally stopped beside a quiet pond where gentle ripples reflected the evening sky. I owe you one more apology, she said quietly. Ethan looked at her with patient attention. Not because I declined your invitation years ago, she continued. Everyone has the right to choose their own path. I am sorry because I believed success could tell me who was worthy of my time. Meeting you again showed me how wrong that belief was. Ethan remained silent for a thoughtful moment before smiling warmly. The person standing beside me today is not the same person who made that decision years ago, he replied. Neither am I. Emily felt tears gathering, but smiled through them. Ethan gently continued. If we move forward, it will not be because of what happened in the past. It will be because of who we both choose to become from this moment on. Emily nodded gratefully as Sophie called them to come watch Oliver chase colorful leaves across the grass. Walking toward them together, neither Ethan nor Emily felt they were trying to rewrite an old story. Instead, they were quietly beginning a new one, built not upon perfect timing, but upon trust, kindness, patience, and the second chance both hearts had finally become ready to receive. Nearly 1 year later, the same walking path through Grant Park carried a very different feeling. The towering Chicago skyline still reflected across the quiet lake. Autumn leaves still drifted gently beneath the old oak tree, and families still filled the park with laughter. Yet for Ethan Carter, every familiar corner now carried memories of unexpected blessings. Sophie walked several steps ahead beside Oliver, who had grown into a strong and joyful golden retriever with the same playful spirit that had first brought two strangers together. Emily Harrison walked beside Ethan at an easy pace, no longer dressed for board meetings or public appearances, but in comfortable clothes that reflected the peaceful life she had gradually chosen to embrace outside the office. Success had never disappeared from her career, but it had finally found its proper place behind the people she loved most. As they reached the wooden bridge where Oliver had once become trapped during the storm, Sophie stopped and smiled. "This is where everything changed," she said. Ethan quietly nodded while Emily gently squeezed his hand. Neither of them needed to explain what she meant. They stood together for several moments watching the calm water flow beneath the bridge, remembering how one ordinary act of kindness had quietly rewritten 3 lives. Later that afternoon, they attended the grand opening of the neighborhood recreation center Ethan had helped design. Children raced across new playgrounds. Parents filled the walking paths with grateful smiles, and local teachers proudly unlocked bright classrooms that would soon welcome hundreds of students. Emily watched Ethan speaking with construction workers, volunteers, and neighborhood families exactly the same way he had always spoken to everyone, with patience, respect, and genuine interest. Titles never changed his character, because his identity had never depended upon recognition. During the short dedication ceremony, city leaders thanked everyone who contributed to the project, but Ethan quietly stepped away from the crowd before anyone could call him to the stage. Emily found him standing near the playground watching Sophie help younger children build small wooden bridges from educational kits he had donated. "You always disappear before anyone can celebrate you," Emily said with a gentle smile. Ethan laughed softly. "Watching them enjoy this place is celebration enough." Emily looked toward Sophie, whose laughter carried through the crisp autumn air. "You once told me that strong foundations stay hidden beneath the surface," she said. "I finally understand. The strongest part of this family has never been what people see. It has always been the kindness holding everything together." Ethan smiled warmly before slipping his hand into hers. As the golden afternoon slowly faded into evening, Sophie called for both of them to join her near the bridge, where Oliver waited patiently with his tail wagging. The 3 of them walked together beneath the glowing sky while the city lights slowly awakened in the distance. No one spoke for several peaceful moments, because some endings are too meaningful for unnecessary words. Ethan quietly realized that the greatest gift life had given him was never a second date, a remarkable coincidence, or even the unexpected return of someone from his past. It was discovering that genuine love arrives without demanding perfection, grows through quiet dignity, and remains strongest when built upon trust, humility, forgiveness, and ordinary kindness. Emily looked toward the bridge one final time before smiling at Ethan. "I am grateful Oliver got lost that day," she whispered. Ethan looked at the happy puppy running beside Sophie and gently smiled back. "Maybe he was never lost," he replied. "Maybe he was simply leading all of us home." Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more stories of courage, kindness, and second chances, because the people the world overlooks often leave the greatest impact.